the punishment people feared more than death. Death is final. Death is quick. But throughout history, there have been punishments so horrifying, so psychologically devastating, that people would literally beg for death rather than endure them. Today, we're diving into the darkest corners of human justice systems to explore the punishments that made death seem like mercy. Imagine being locked in a small, windowless cell, no human contact, no conversation, no sunlight, just you, four walls, and the slow dissolution of your sanity. This is solitary confinement, and it's still used today in many prison systems around the world. But historically, this punishment was taken to even more extreme levels. In medieval dungeons, prisoners were placed in oubliettes, literally meaning forgotten places, in French. These were narrow, bottle-shaped chambers where prisoners were lowered through a trapdoor and left to rot. No trial date. No hope of release. Just the slow, agonizing descent into madness. The psychological effects are devastating. Within days, prisoners begin experiencing hallucinations. Within weeks, their sense of reality becomes completely distorted. Many prisoners in long-term solitary confinement report that time becomes meaningless. They can't tell if minutes or hours have passed. Some begin talking to imaginary companions just to maintain some semblance of human interaction. Modern research has shown that prolonged isolation causes the same brain damage as physical trauma. The areas responsible for memory, cognition, and emotional regulation literally begin to shrink. It's no wonder that many prisoners preferred execution to this psychological torture. In ancient Rome, there was a fate worse than death for the ruling class, losing their citizenship and being declared infamous. This wasn't just a legal status. It was complete social annihilation. An infamous person couldn't hold office, couldn't testify in court, couldn't even appear in public without facing ridicule and violence. But public humiliation took many forms throughout history. The stocks and pillories of medieval Europe weren't just about physical discomfort, they were about destroying a person's reputation and social standing forever. In small communities where everyone knew everyone, this social death was often permanent. In colonial America, the Scarlet Letter wasn't fiction, it was reality. Adulterers were forced to wear identifying marks, branding them as outcasts for life. Their children inherited this shame. Their families were shunned. Death would have been a relief compared to decades of social isolation and contempt. The Chinese practice of social death during various dynastic periods involved erasing someone's name from all records, forbidding anyone from speaking their name, and treating them as if they had never existed. This complete erasure from society created a living death that many found unbearable. Being cast out from your homeland might not sound worse than death, but for our ancestors, it often was. In ancient Greece, ostracism was considered one of the harshest punishments possible. To be exiled meant losing everything: your family, your property, your identity, your protection. In the ancient world, being banished meant becoming completely vulnerable. Without the protection of your tribe or city-state, you were fair game for bandits, wild animals, and enemy forces. You had no legal rights, no social support system, and no hope of return. The psychological impact was devastating. Humans are social creatures, and complete separation from one's community created a profound existential crisis. Many exiled individuals simply walked into the wilderness to die rather than face decades of lonely wandering. Even in more recent history, exile remained a feared punishment. Napoleon's exile to Elba and later St. Helena wasn't just about removing him from power, it was about condemning him to a slow, psychological death far from everything he valued. While death ends suffering, slavery perpetuates it indefinitely. Throughout history, being enslaved was often considered a fate worse than death because it meant the complete loss of human dignity and agency. In ancient civilizations, defeated warriors often chose suicide over capture because they knew what awaited them. Roman gladiators, despite their fame, were essentially slaves forced to fight for entertainment. Many preferred to die in the arena rather than live as property. The transatlantic slave trade created conditions so horrific that many Africans threw themselves overboard during the Middle Passage, choosing death in the ocean over a lifetime of bondage. The psychological trauma of being treated as property, of having no control over your life, your family, or your body, created a living hell that many found unbearable. Even after abolition, systems like sharecropping and debt peonage created conditions so similar to slavery that they drove many to despair. The knowledge that you would never be free, that your children would inherit your chains, made death seem like the only escape. Before modern medicine, certain medical conditions were essentially death sentences, but slow, agonizing death sentences. Diseases like leprosy didn't just cause physical suffering. They led to complete social isolation. Lepers were declared legally dead while still alive, forbidden from contact with their families, and forced to live in colonies outside of society. The bubonic plague, cancer, and other wasting diseases created prolonged suffering that made death seem merciful. Without pain medication or effective treatment, people endured months or years of agony, watching their bodies slowly deteriorate while remaining fully conscious. Mental illness, too, was often worse than death. Before understanding of psychiatric conditions, mentally ill individuals were often chained in basements, subjected to brutal treatments, or simply abandoned. The stigma was so severe that families sometimes preferred to claim a relative had died rather than admit to mental illness. Today, we like to think we've evolved beyond such cruel punishments, but many of these fates worse than death still exist in various forms. Long-term solitary confinement continues in many prison systems. Social media can create modern versions of public humiliation that follow people forever. Human trafficking creates new forms of slavery. Chronic pain and mental illness still cause immense suffering. The common thread in all these punishments is the destruction of hope. Death, however painful, is final. But these punishments created endless suffering with no clear end in sight. They attacked not just the body, but the mind, the spirit, and the very essence of what makes us human. Understanding these historical punishments helps us appreciate not just how far we've come, but how important it is to protect human dignity and rights. Because when we strip away a person's humanity, we create something far worse than death. We create a living hell that can last for years, decades, or even generations. The next time someone says, "There are things worse than death," remember these stories. Sometimes, mercy truly is found in finality, and the greatest cruelty is forcing someone to endure when they have nothing left to live for.